Hey there, my beautiful souls. I don't know where you are in the country, but where I am one of those states that has been snowed in by this massive snowstorm. Fantastic. But it did get me thinking. I had plenty of time to think and to do this video. It isn't love, it's your trauma bonds keeping you tied to that relationship. Because for those of us in a traumatic relationship and a toxic relationship, we often confuse our trauma bonds with love. And it's why we stay for longer than we should, or one of the reasons. So let's dive deep into it. You've been here before, haven't you? Staring into the abyss of yet another argument, their voice ringing in your ears long after the door slams shut. You wonder, why are you still in this relationship? But I love them, you tell yourself. And maybe that's true, or maybe, brace yourself, darling, it's not love at all. Maybe what you're feeling is a trauma bond. So before you go throwing your phone across the room, let's unpack this together. No judgment, just a warm hug and some truth bombs, delivered with love, of course. What is a trauma bond anyway? At its core, a trauma bond is an emotional attachment that forms in relationships marked by intermittent reinforcement of love and pain. One minute you're on top of the world basking in affection, the next you're scraping yourself off the emotional floor. And the cycle continues. It's a roller coaster, and instead of asking to get off, you're holding on for dear life, hoping that the next loop will be the one that changes everything. Trauma bonds often develop in relationships with emotional, physical, or psychological abuse. But here's the kicker: the abuse doesn't have to be extreme to create these bonds. Even subtle patterns of manipulation, neglect, or criticism can leave you feeling trapped in a loop of craving their validation and fearing their rejection. The deception of it all. Trauma bonds can feel like the most intense, all consuming love that you've ever experienced. Why? Because your brain is doing its best to make sense of the chaos. Here's how. The highs are really high. When things are good, they're not just good, they're euphoric. You feel like you've won the love lottery. Those fleeting moments of bliss release dopamine, the same chemical that lights up your brain when you eat chocolate or win a game. And let's be real, who doesn't want more of that? Consequently, the lows reinforce those highs. When things go south, your body goes into survival mode, pumping out stress hormones like cortisol. It's exhausting, but it makes those moments of reconciliation feel even sweeter. We survived that fight, you think, so we must be meant to be. And believe it or not, your inner child is calling the shots. Trauma bonds often tap into unresolved childhood wounds. So if you grew up feeling unworthy, unseen, or unsafe, this relationship might feel like a second chance to prove your worth. Spoiler alert, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You've always been worthy. If you're clinging to the belief that they'll change, you're not alone. Hope is a powerful thing, but in the context of a trauma bond, it's often fear wearing a disguise. The fear of being alone. Society's obsession with coupledom does not help. It whispers, better the devil you know than the single life you fear. But darling, loneliness in a toxic relationship is far worse than solitude in your own safe, radiant space. And as if that wasn't bad enough, there's the fear of failure. Who wants to fail? And walking away can feel like admitting defeat. But staying in a relationship that drains your spirit is not winning. It's self-betrayal. And then, of course, there's fear of the unknown. This is a biggie. I mean, what if leaving doesn't make things better? What if you're broken forever? Honey, these fears are normal, but they're not facts. The truth is, the unknown also holds your freedom, your joy, and most importantly, your peace. So how can you know, I mean really know, if it's a trauma bond and not love? Well, here are some red flags waving frantically in the wind. Number one, you feel powerless. Love should empower you, not make you feel like a puppet on a string. Number two, you're always walking on eggshells. If you are constantly monitoring your words and actions to avoid conflict, that isn't love, that's fear. Number three, you excuse their behavior. Things like, they're just stressed, they didn't mean it. Does that sound familiar? Real love doesn't require mental gymnastics to justify cruelty. Number four, you can't imagine life without them. If the thought of leaving feels like the end of the world, it's likely because your trauma bond has convinced you that they are your lifeline. Spoiler alert, they're not. Breaking a trauma bond is hard, let's not sugarcoat it, but it's also the most liberating, life-affirming journey you will ever undertake. And here's how to start. Educate yourself. Understanding trauma bonds is the first step to dismantling them. Knowledge is power, and you're about to become a superhero in your own story. Build a support system. You don't have to do this alone. Friends, family, therapists, and support groups can provide the safety net that you need. Set boundaries. Boundaries are your new best friend. Start small if you need to, but practice saying no and prioritizing your needs. Focus on self love. This isn't just a buzzword, babe. It's the antidote to every lie your trauma bond has told you. Treat yourself with the kindness, compassion, and care you've been pouring into someone who does not deserve it. And seek professional help. Trauma bonds are deeply rooted in past pain. A therapist can help you dig up those roots and plant something beautiful in their place. Imagine yourself a year from now. You're standing taller, breathing easier, and smiling like you really mean it. You've traded chaos for calm, confusion for clarity, and pain for peace. This version of you exists. It's just waiting on the other side of this journey. You're not leaving love behind. You are leaving a cycle that's been masquerading as love. Real love, the kind that uplifts, nourishes, and empowers, is out there. And guess what? It starts with you. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "But I love them," pause. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this really love, or is this my trauma bond talking? The answer just might set you free. Remember, darling, you are not too broken. You're not too old or too anything to walk away from what no longer serves you. You are simply too radiant to settle for less than you deserve. And that's a wrap.